Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today is Senior Editor for all things West Coast, James Riswick, and features. What is up, man?
Oh, just, covering the West Coast as best I can from Alaska to, I guess, Tierra del Fuego. We, recently expanded to South America, so.
Minding the Pacific Fleet. All right. Yeah. That sounds good. We're actually having some little bit Oregonian-like weather here. It's been kind of a little warm. We had a little bit of rain. The snow's melting a bit, but it is going to be a low of 1 degree Fahrenheit on Saturday. So we had like maybe 36 hours of a cold snap, which is actually a pretty good beer. I think that's a Sam Adams beer. Something to maybe take a few drinks of this time of year. But we have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about the Aston Martin DBX. Pretty important crossover for Aston Martin. James has driven it most recently. I'll be interested to hear what he thinks. I drove it a while back, but it'll be fun to get more into that because it's a hugely important car for Aston Martin. We'll talk about the Kia Carnival. I am in it right now. James has an interesting piece on our site involving the Captain Kirk chairs. So that's a driveway test right there. And, I've been enjoying minivan life this week, so we'll get more into that. The opposite of a minivan is the Chevy Tahoe. It does many of the same things. It's just much larger, much, troop transporter-like in appearance. And it's aimed at, perhaps a similar kind of buyer, but, different as far as execution. Let's put it that way. We'll get into some rather interesting features we ran through this week. 20 craziest car redesigns of the last 20 years. The XJ is one that really caught my eye. I guess we'll have a little bit of a British theme to this show. And then best new cars for snow, or just best cars for snow. I guess they don't have to be brand new. So Aston Martin DBX. It's a pretty big deal crossover for Aston Martin. When this thing landed in your driveway or your street, what was your initial impression?
Okay, interesting. So, interesting question for that. Honestly, I was fully expecting a sort of half-assed, cynical brand exercise here. Aston Martin's after, the middle of the thousands kind of got stale, and you really started to notice like all the bits and pieces that probably didn't deserve to be in a car that was like $200,000. And it kind of felt like really old Aston Martin in that same respect. So honestly, like the Bentegas of the world and like the Urus, not appealing to. So I was not very, although it's an exciting car to get in my driveway, and I don't get a lot, here in the Pacific Northwest fleet, I wasn't exactly gaga for it. So I immediately got it. I did what you normally would do when handed a $222,000 Aston Martin sport SUV with a 542 horsepower twin turbo V8 from Mercedes-AMG. I put my rear facing child seat in the back to see how much space there was. And there was a shocking amount of space. This actually has more a longer wheelbase than the Bentayga and the Urus, which share their wheelbase, I think, and platform with an Audi Q7. At the same time, it's shorter than those in overall size, so it actually grants it a ton of interior space. And then I did my luggage test, because of course that's what you do after the child test. And there's a lot of actually user-friendly cargo space in the back. And you look around, and the interior isn't just being carried by the leather. That's quite nice. It's always been an Aston Martin thing. But all the bits and pieces are actually really impressive, largely because a lot of the bits and pieces come from Mercedes-Benz, which is better than like Miata door handles and like a Volvo S40 radio that Aston Martin has used in the past. So if you're going to borrow bits and pieces for an interior, which can kind of make or break a car, making it feel premium, it's kind of underappreciated. Mercedes, good people to do it, to boost from. So already, kind of my fears about the half-assery were being reduced, and the fact that, wait a second, this actually is really useful. It's, okay. Then I drove it. And I got to tell you, I think this is one of the best cars I've ever driven.
Wow.
I mean,
okay.
And it all comes down to the fact that, wait, okay, it's one thing to be amused and have fun driving an Aston Martin. Like, no kidding. Like, you'd hope that it at least gets that bar. But when it's so well-rounded as it is, like, this is actually functional and it's well made. And now it actually meets that bar of being like great to drive. And there's a lot of serious engineering in this car. It has an air suspension, electronic air suspension. It is height adjustable to 5 heights, which I guess it can go off-road as a result, because it does go pretty high off the ground. But then it also lowers when you put it into sport mode. It has an electronic anti-roll control system for all 4 corners, which is some serious tech. I mean, this is kind of what's on the Rivian, I believe, that everybody's so impressed with. I could be wrong about that, but at least in theory, it does the same thing. It's so because of this air suspension, the anti-roll control, it delivers astonishing ride comfort. These have just gigantic wheels on them, and yet the ride is just sensational. At the same time, you put it into sport, and body roll is reduced to what you would get in a DB11. And I can confirm that. Now, this car was riding on winter tires, which normally I would applaud, because a lot of cars show up here and they're on summers and they get parked for a week. Grip was not great. I had a couple of clenching moments on damp roads and a hairpin, kind of backed off. But that said, I mean, there's a lot. It's just a serious performance vehicle. It's quite clearly one of the sportiest, greatest SUVs to drive. And yet, in terms of just a grand tourer, which is what Aston Martin is all about. This is just one of the great GT car manufacturers of all time. That's what this is. This is a family GT car. It is phenomenal. I just started off being kind of like meh, coming in, to being impressed by its packaging, to like falling deeply in love with it. I love this car so much. It costs $222,000, and it's like, 2 really excellent cars for the price of 2 really excellent cars. So I was kind of, I came back from my 4+ hour drive yesterday, just kind of in love with the thing. It's like the ultimate Volkswagen GTI. It's the only car you need, because it does everything.
Wow.
Fantastic.
High praise there. I mean, James, at times you've known to take a rather cynical approach to some of the cars, which is a good thing. You want to be a healthy skeptic and a critic, of course. I'm a little surprised you were blown away this much by the Aston Martin DBX. I mean, to be clear, I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. It's interesting you talk about those Volvo door handles. To really take a step back, his getting out, being sold by Ford and getting out of the Premier Automotive Group, been like the greatest new lease on life for Aston Martin. I mean, to me, the vehicles have gone up exponentially. They're actually getting some form of investment, and they're doing like partnerships with like Mercedes AMG. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's helped immensely, because they are essentially a standalone company at this point. So it's interesting too that I put a car seat in mine the day it arrived. Had to go drop the kid off somewhere. So I guess if you're listening to this podcast and you're looking for, we had martinis at sunset in, some Tuscan countryside, which is what I did with the Aston Martin DB11 6 years ago, another lifetime ago, on a press trip after the drive. It's not quite the vibe. That's also not exactly the mission for this vehicle, but it can be, I think. I mean, it's a lot of fun to drive. Steering was great.
Yes. Yes. Fantastic.
It's really dialed in.
Yeah, steering's phenomenal. You can just feel.
That was, I think, one of my favorite parts of it.
Oh, it's like this side of Porsche. I can't think of anything better. Like, and like you utterly feel all the nuances, the subtle little dips and crevices of the road, but then like the effort that's kind of like very linear, and it's like moving it through like warm butter. It's just beautiful with all the feel in the world. So very good. I mean, it ultimately it's like extremely expensive car is extremely good. So,
yeah.
But, some Astons, like, they were extremely expensive, but they were like, would you really pick one? Like, would you really pick one over a 911? I mean, you'd have to like, you're buying it for the beauty, you're buying it for the badge. But like this is serious. I mean, you can buy like a Porsche Cayennes, the turbo, this, and that, the whole sentence on the back. They're this expensive. I'd rather have this. Absolutely. And and Porsches are fantastic, but this is such a complete effort. I'm really, really impressed by it. And I think it's classy too. Like it's pretty, but I mean, I had the gray with a black interior, which is a little too, but I mean, it's classy. It's a classy car. It doesn't shout. Like if you drive a Urus, my goodness. I mean, that you might as well just have like a big flags on the car and like a loudspeaker blowing up, like saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. This is not that. It's pretty and it stands out because it's pretty and it's an Aston Martin. But it's not that showy. And it's, really nice car.
I actually was impressed with like it's a beautiful vehicle stem to stern, but the back end is actually very well conceived. It's handsome, from the lights to that kind of like almost ducktail on the back. Mm-hmm. It's very good looking. And to me, that almost is like an example of how well thought out the DBX is. They weren't just like, hey, we got to make a crossover. Let's slap a badge on it. Yep. We'll drop in this big engine and cross our fingers and hope for the best. To me, it really is. If you're an Aston Martin buyer and you're thinking, I need a crossover. There's, Cayenne turbos and other things, that you mentioned earlier. This could be my car, and maybe this is my only car. It definitely, it delivers in that sense. It's, I had a great time driving it too. This was literally one of the highlights of my late winter, early spring when I drove this, this was last year now. But every bit as memorable in some ways as that DB11 drive I did in, the foothills of Tuscany half a lifetime ago. And I don't even mean that like sarcastically or facetiously. It's like, when you peel away some of the extra like goodies of a press trip, and you're just thinking about the driving dynamics of the vehicle, the DBX really delivers. And it was a lot of fun. The interior was gorgeous. I actually, to add to the sort of like kind of semi-lame things it sounds like we both did in these things, I shot a video for HR in the DBX's interior. They asked me to do something for, I think it was Take Your Kid to Work Day or something. And, they give you all these like things you can do, like cards, whatever, however. And I was like, well, I feel like I'm the only people manager at this company that's got an Aston Martin in his driveway. Let's go see if we can shoot a video off my phone in this thing. And I got a pretty good reaction, I must say. I mean, that's one of those things where it's very enjoyable when somebody's like, so could you explain your job again? Wait a minute, what is that? But it does have that presence. It can be jaw dropping. I had a kind of a creamy white one that was, beautiful, beautiful car. So you went for a 4-hour drive. What else have you done with it?
Well, that was it. We only had it. It's a shorter. It's a shorter loan. Well, no, I did go out of the way. I said like we're doing pickup tonight. We're getting takeout. So I drove longer than normal to get takeout and drove the family around a bit. But you can only go so far on an afternoon before hitting traffic. But the thing is,
you got takeout in like San Francisco.
The one downside, besides the kind of crap cup holders, is fuel economy. I was getting like 15.8.
Well, yeah.
And so as a daily driver, even if I have all of the money, I would not feel great about driving this thing every day. But if I also had all the money, I'd buy name electric car, and then I would have something to go on long drives and take like awesome and would like a grand touring kind of coupe, beautiful car. And this is both of those things. So like, I don't think, you need to have all of the money, but there's actually a perfectly cromulent use case here for this car, as long as you have all the money. And the thing with grand touring is like, yes, I would love a 2007 Aston Martin DBX, and I would like to take it with my wife on lovely journeys here and there, and be just lovely. But we have the kid now, and can't really put him in the back seat of like a grand touring coupe. Kind of difficult. So this is just kind of dealing with the reality of that. It's pretty great. Yeah. It's only so much I can gush, concur. I guess. I could keep going, really.
I think another enjoyable part of my stint is I also went and got takeout somewhere not all that close, and I actually pre-ordered it at the time. I think this was long enough ago that I think restaurants were partially closed in Michigan, but I don't remember all the specifics. But you had to order ahead of time to make sure you got your food. And then they're like, okay, what car will you be arriving in?
Oh, no.
And I'm an Aston Martin DBX. And I remember the guy was like, are you sure you're going to be eating pizza? Like, shouldn't you maybe aim higher tonight? So I was like, well, pizza's good. You got to eat, right, man? I mean, I don't know. But
I'm a simple person. I like the simple things, but I like good cars.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, I think we've hit this pretty hard. I mean, any final thoughts on this? Any things you didn't like? I mean, this is a tough segment. You got the Lambo, you got the Bentayga. You can make a Cayenne as nice as you want it to be. This is a little bit cheaper than the Rolls-Royce, which is a funny sentence to say. Most things are. But I mean, to me, this is probably one of the best all-around, I'll use the cliche, athletes in the class. It's like, it does a lot of things well. Some of the other ones are definitely more in your face. I also found that I just kind of liked it more than like the Bentayga. So, that's a qualitative approach.
This thing could be a Kia, and I love it just as much. It's that good. It really is good. Oh, I meant to say that what you were talking about in terms of how good it looks and the rear end looking particularly good. One of the reasons why I think it looks so good and better than others is because of its unique platform. It is on a unique platform. And one of the ways that you can really make an SUV look nicer, or anything really, is make it longer and have a really long wheelbase. So the thing that makes it so darn useful inside is probably the result of them prioritizing making it look good. And I think it's kind of like a happy. There are other instances of this in the automotive industry where an effort to actually make it look pretty ended up making it. The Jaguar F-Pace is a similar situation where they wanted to make the proportions right, and as a result, they made it longer, and that made it more practical. So I think that's what we're looking at. That's one of the reasons here. Also, because it's a unique platform to Aston Martin. It's not like Bentley that was given an existing VW group Audi A7 platform and say, here, make it work. That's probably a big reason why that thing kind of looks awkward. And there are various examples of this out there. So just want to touch on that, and then that's what I forgot to mention. So we can move on.
Sounds good. I will put a bow on it by saying I think the F-Pace is a very handsome Jaguar as far as crossovers go. Beautiful crossover. You were talking about Kias, though. Mm-hmm. We've both spent some time in the Carnival recently. I literally just got out of one a couple hours ago, and this is actually my first time behind the wheel of the new Carnival. It's a pretty important vehicle for Kia. They've made a very credible, new generation of minivan for them. I mean, are we still calling these things minivans? Are they multi-purpose vehicles?
Yes, we are. Kia MPV. You know what Europeans call minivans? MPVs. Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
It's like, we're not going to call it an elevator anymore. No. That's not cool. We're going to call them lifts.
It's a lift, right?
Yeah.
There you go. When I think of MPVs, I think of like those like military vehicle landing crafts. Yeah. I don't know. I like it though. I mean, it's interesting. I haven't fully digested everything. You know, I've been a lot of times with the cars we test and review and try to form a, you know, holistic opinion on. You don't always do the thing that maybe you really need to do to push that car where it goes. You should try to. You always should try to, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily happen. This week, I've been driving my son to and from preschool. That's exactly what you should be doing in a minivan. I think tonight we're going to go pick up a bike. So I believe that is another good purpose for it. Let me put it that way. It's, you know, I have the EX trim. So I believe that's, you know, it is what it is. But I don't know. I mean, I've generally liked it.
That's noteworthy though. So you had the EX and I had the SX. And this is noteworthy because usually Kias show up with all of the equipment, the fanciest, highest trim level. And you always have to have in the back of your, which makes them like at their best foot forward, really nice. And you get a lot of people saying, oh, wow, it's a Kia. It's amazing. Like, this is so nice. Bravo. Yeah, but what is the tiny percentage of people who are actually going to buy these? And in the back of our minds, we've always been like, okay, but what's the EX like? Like, with all the bells and whistles, let's not be too, like, singing their praises because we don't know what... It makes it seem like they're hiding something, frankly, even though I don't think they are. It just kind of makes it seem like that. So it's nice that we get, like, the less than top-of-the-line version. So the one I had, like, didn't have the heated steering wheel and that didn't have the all-digital instruments. And it was still really nice inside. Still had the multi-tone leather. Mine was a higher trim level than even you had. Did you have 7 or 8 passenger?
Mine is, let me count, 8.
Yep. Oh, so you had the middle seat. So you have the Captain Kirk chair too.
I did.
Yeah. So let me explain that. So
here's another thing.
Right. So here's another example of this. So the SX Prestige, the one that everyone drove, has these VIP lounge seats, which are ones that go back really far, and they have these lazy boy recliners on them, and they move laterally in the van as well. And everybody, you know, rightly touted them as being impressive. Great. Except they're exclusive to the SX Prestige. Again, the tiny percentage one that not that many people are going to buy. So what does the other ones have? Well, the answer is either you have like the same, like captain's chairs that don't do any of that, the leg rest, or with the 7-passenger one, or you have what we have, which is the 8-passenger. And so it has a middle seat, like a lot of the 8, well, you have to have a middle seat for 8 passengers, but like the cases with all these minivans, the second row format is different. So with the Pacifica and the Sienna, the 8-passenger seat is a pretty jump seaty thing. It's pretty narrow and small to make it easily lifted out. So you could put a child seat on there, but you probably really wouldn't want to sit on it that much. This one's a step up from that. It's flatter, a little harder than the outboard seats, kind of like the Honda Odysseys. But this one slides to a hilarious degree. You can slide it all the way forward so that you can more easily deal with your child in the forward-facing seat, sitting safely in the middle of the van, which is nice. You can, wipe noses from the front seat. Another nice thing about that is if you have them rear-facing, the people in the outboard seats can more easily tend to a baby facing rearward. That's nice. Also, you can also, by having the seat move backwards and forwards, it's easier to put 3 car seats across. That's, people buy unique thin car seats for that capability because it's very difficult to fit these, imperial thrones that we all have to carry around, 3 of them across in a car. Or just provide enough room for grandma to also sit back there. So this thing, not only does it go forward, it goes beyond. It slides all the way to the 3rd row, which, provides that flexibility. Or you could lower the third row and it goes like all the way back to where the third row folds into the floor, providing this kind of weird, what I call the Captain Kirk chair, where you're sitting in a middle seat surrounded by nothing with the two outboard captain's chairs forward of you, and then the front row in front of you. It's like this bizarre, like captain's chair, like literal captain's chair in the middle of the vehicle. It's weird. It's a very weird to sit back there, but it does provide this unusual degree of flexibility that could be helpful, because you could have 5 people on board, but they're not all going to be like smushed in, and you're going to end up with more remaining cargo room than if you just, you had a 7-passenger one and you just raised like the 40 portion in the third row. So, all of these minivans have different second rows. I don't think any of them is better than the other. I think some will be better for you than others. And I think that's ultimately a great thing, but it does mean that, you should know what your options are and to really crawl around and check these things out at a dealer.
Generally, I think the Carnival, and I give them credit because they, at times you think sometimes Kia and Hyundai will just chase value like to the end of the day, and it feels like even in this like more basic EX trim, you get a lot of stuff. I don't, like, you didn't have heated steering wheel. I don't have satellite radio. So, we're really roughing it here. Let me put it that way.
Get back to the DBX.
Yeah, exactly. But you gotta have standards, right, man?
Yeah.
It's definitely the thing about minivans is you gotta love putting car seats in them and being able to literally just push a button, the door opens, and there's your kid. It's, super easy parenting. Let me put it that way. The other challenge I think you face too is like how you're going to lay things out inside. And, this one there's a lot of room in there. Let me put it that way, as you would expect. I would also argue too that the Carnival is maybe the style play. I don't know if I'm going too far afield out there, but I think it's very distinctive in that segment, more so than the Odyssey, the Sienna. Although the Sienna's, what's that?
The Odyssey is like, it's a stroller. It is utterly devoid of character and joy. It is just like, actually my stroller is a far better, more interesting piece of design than the Honda Odyssey. I take that back stroller that's sitting behind me.
What kind of stroller is it?
Oh, it's a Thule Spring. It's a great. It's a pretty thing.
Wow. See, that's why you register, right?
Yeah. So, with all those minivans, what was I going to say? Oh, the thing with the minivan segment is that they all are very different. But the thing that really stands out for one of them is fuel economy. And that's ultimately kind of what hurts the Carnival for me. Because although, if you were to ask me outside of fuel economy, which one would I choose and recommend? I might recommend the Carnival. It looks really good. And I really like the functionality of the interior. And the interior also looks really nice. I mean, it doesn't scream, I am a minivan. You are a chauffeur. You don't matter like the Honda Odyssey does. It is kind of cool. It kind of helps you forget that you're in a minivan. The old Sedona did that too, actually. But the Sienna gets, I was getting like 38 miles per gallon out of the Sienna. And that was making no attempt to drive economically, it was filled with stuff and all of the people and the dogs, and we get 37 miles per gallon. And you're going to get 22, 23 in the Sedona, and in the Pacifica V6, and in the Odyssey. And that is an enormous difference. It is huge. You're going to be spending multiple hundreds of dollars every year more on gas to fill up a Carnival compared to a Sienna. And do I like the Carnival more than that? No, not even close. So the Sienna has such an ace up its sleeve in that regard. The Pacifica Hybrid too, of course, it's a plug-in hybrid, and that's better in that regard too. But with that, there is do you pay enough income tax to get a $7,500 tax rebate back, or can you wait around? If you buy it in May, you're going to be waiting a long time to see that $7,500 that came off the price tag. So, there's that too. So, as much as I love the Carnival, that fuel economy. Like, we're not just talking about like 4, we're talking about 14 miles per gallon. That's insane. So ultimately, that is such a huge determining factor for me, because it's a minivan, like the power in the Sienna is fine, and fine is all you need.
Exactly. I mean, I think when you're looking at, if you're at the life stage where you're probably going to buy a minivan, even if you're investing in your minivan and getting all the bells and whistles, you still have obviously expenses, children, dogs, that's the stage of life where you're not looking to maybe drop extra money on your vehicle, or at least not this vehicle. Maybe the family hauler is something that's a little more, everyday use, and you have like a sports car or something. So, it's interesting when I look at the field, I feel like I maybe would drop this somewhere at like 3rd place, somewhere in there. I tend to agree with you that the Sienna hybrid at 37, it's really tough to beat that. And it's a really good product, stem to stern. Mm-hmm. I tend to like the Pacifica and the Pacifica hybrid in 2nd place. I think the Carnival looks more like, it stands out more, but I tend to like the looks of the Pacifica a little more. I think it's more of a classic look inside and out. And I also think it drives a little bit better. It's a little more refined. Especially with the hybrid, it almost has like a planted feel to the ground. And I think that one is also, you talk about, you got to figure out what your use case is. With the Pacifica hybrid, like let's say you have a relatively short commute and you can plug in there. Well, boom, suddenly that's the secret sauce for you. But if you have a longer commute after you run out to say 30 miles or so of electric charge, well, then you're just kind of hauling around your dog, your kids, and a bunch of batteries. So then you're just running on like a heavy, Chrysler crossover with the old Pentastar V6 in it. There's pluses and minuses to both, but I tend to put the Carnival somewhere in 3rd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a comparison with the Pacifica hybrid and the Sienna, and run over enough miles, they basically got the same fuel economy, because the Sienna continued to be just as efficient, whereas the Pacifica is like, infinity MPG and then drops to 20 or something. So the other thing is, you said put it in 3rd. That means the Odyssey's last. And it's kind of sad. I should clarify that. And honestly, it should be, because
you think it's last? I was going to say maybe a tie for 3rd. I don't know.
I think it's last because I do like that it does have unique functionality of its magic seat. But that's kind of it. That's the only kind of distinctive element that it has, while at the same time being like so boring, unnecessarily boring compared to everything else, and it's also to drive. Like the back in the day, like one of the reasons you got the Odyssey was because it, quote, drove like an Accord. This doesn't drive like an Accord. The steering is like really numb and flaccid, and not just it's really a downer to drive the thing. And why do you, owning a minivan, you're kind of like, there's already kind of a depressing element to it. It's kind of, there's a reason so many people buy SUVs instead. So like, you'd have to go out of the way to make it so blah. Like, Honda, you can do better than that. It's not like indicative of the brand. It's just kind of like this. I hope they turn up the volume a little more in the next one.
I will say this: rolling up in the Carnival is great for preschool drop-off and, around town errands, but it's definitely more fun to roll up in a Chevy Tahoe Premier, $76,000 plus with the big 6.2 liter V8, beautiful shade of kind of like midnight blue. Yeah, I mean, when you roll up in that, you literally see over everybody else. So, there's obviously some pluses and minuses to that. But I mean, my big takeaway after a week in that is that I think GM really has gotten all of their large SUVs for this new generation that launched around the 2021 model year, 2020, 21, 22. They've gotten them right. They did interesting things to them. The styling, I think, is better across the board, especially with the Tahoe. I think it's a pretty classy look. I think you could look at this or a Yukon and say, you know what? I think I might want the Tahoe. I don't want those headlights and all the stuff that GMC does. The interior, very nice. They have the premium package, a bunch of different options on it, cameras, the extra trailer stuff. It didn't have stop start or the steering wheel lockout thanks to the chip shortage, which is, hey, save $100, right? I don't know if I care that much about stop start anymore, but overall, it's a very nice vehicle, stem to stern. If you're playing the drinking game, I've now said that 3 times in this podcast. So, very nice vehicle, very capable, and huge. I drove a Suburban last year with the Eco Diesel. Not the Eco Diesel, the Duramax diesel. I said that on a previous podcast, and somebody was like, you're dropping Ram and Jeep diesels into General Motors products. It's the Duramax, of course. But, with that, along with the independent rear suspensions, which do give you a little bit more space and, of course, better handling,
yeah,
I think these are fresh vehicles. So,
no, the IRS really is a huge deal with that thing. I mean, it can't be said enough because, yes, it's a huge vehicle, but the old one, like the third row, was useless. Like you're sitting on the floor, and then the floor itself is like 9 feet in the air. And you got all wiggly. You had the wiggly jiggly rear end because it was, not an IRS. And it was the reason why the Ford Expedition was better. Now, I do think Ford still enjoys an advantage under the hood because the EcoBoost V6 is just a superior power plant. It is more powerful and ridiculously smooth and is more efficient. But GM has the diesel, which is pretty great. And the GM interiors are nicer than Ford's, even with the updated Expedition for 22. So as long as you get the diesel, I'm on board. Get the GMs.
This is my first taste of the 2022 Tahoe. I'm pretty sure I drove the 21, which was obviously the main model year, like new generation for this particular SUV. And it had the Google powered infotainment, the Chevy 3 or whatever they call it. And it's interesting. This is my second sort of experience with this. I did it in the Polestar last fall. Different executions, but I mean, more Android in my life, more Google in my life. And, it worked okay. I think the user interface, is fine. It's not necessarily my favorite. I probably liked it a little more on the Polestar even, but I mean, it worked. Google Assistant works. Frankly, some of the stuff I was surprised actually worked a little better in the car than it did on my phone, which is usually not the way it goes. I mean, that's the main improvement for 2022. And I'll say this, when it comes to large GM SUVs, these generations go on, even in this day and age, these things go for a while. So we don't expect to see major changes with these until, who knows, they become full electric vehicles at some point in the future. I don't know. But I mean, this is the truck that you're going to get if you so choose. Speaking of trucks, and this is another big update for the new generation, is the interior is not like the trucks. It's a whole new bespoke, Chevy Tahoe interior and Suburban and Yukon, and to me, that made a big difference. These things feel competitive with things in that price point, whereas before it was kind of sometimes I do feel like I'm driving an enclosed Silverado or something. So that's a nice step up for them as well. So big SUV, put a lot of stuff in it, kids, dogs, stuff, all the stuff that you would do in your minivan. So that's the Tahoe. Let's move on to the features part of this. You did a nice piece last week on the 20 craziest car redesigns of the last 20 years. I thought these were interesting in the fact that I kind of went back and forgot how significant some of these redesigns were. And it was interesting too, the one that caught my eye was the XJ, how Jaguar essentially reused the same platform and made it look like 40 years different, which shows you what design can do. That's for sure. But I mean, were you swilling whiskey at your bar one night and this started to come out on, napkins? How did you come up with this idea?
Well, I was in the car for 19 hours driving from Portland to LA or vice versa. You start, the last time that happened, I wrote an article about all 50 U.S. license plates. And this time I started looking around and thinking about most substantial car redesigns in the last 20 years, which is the better part of my automotive career, really. And that XJ really was. I drove the 2009 and I drove the 2010. And the 09, the one that looked really old, was a sensational car to drive. The platform just carried over, and they talk about to use the same platform and the same wheelbase that they're shared, and to make it look that different is really astonishing. That said, I think the old one looks better now. I was so blown away at the time by how beautiful that 2010 XJ was, but I think the old one has aged better. It's just so timeless. It's the one I'd want. I'd want the old timey one.
I had the same just impetus looking at that. I remember how important that XJ was. It won all those interior awards at that time.
It's beautiful interior.
Yeah, people almost couldn't wait to kick the old dated one to the curb. But now here we are, a decade plus on, and it's that the new XJ looked like a lot of different things that we came across in the 2010s, whereas the old one, that to me is more of a Jaguar.
Yeah, I think they're both really special, but I think I would want the old one better. But there's some stuff here that there's I framed it as there's the ones that changed for the better. Holy cow, look, how is that even from the same brand? The Hyundai Elantra in 2010, it's actually not a bad car at the time. It was pretty practical and not that bad, but it looked like absolutely nothing. And then bam, that's what 2011 for Hyundai and Kia was just an absolute renaissance, where they went from cars that look like absolutely nothing to having some of the most avant-garde, hey, look at me styling in the form of Hyundai, and then also just really clean, classic, modern, very attractive styling in the form of Kia. And it's just you look at some of the before and after photos and you just oh, wait, those came 1 year after another. The Kia Sportage is hilarious. The difference between them. It looks like 3 generations are missing there. And besides the fact that they were giant redesigns for these individual cars, that was a turning point for Hyundai and Kia. They were, value, long warranty brands. Sure, I guess you can get one because you don't know where the Honda store is. But after that, it was only just a rocket-like trajectory for Hyundai and Kia thereafter, leading to now there being Genesis as well. And it all came from that redesign in 2011. So that was really staggering for those. That's really, and the thing is, this list really could have been just most of a lot of Hyundai and Kias, but I had to draw the line somewhere.
It's funny. I remember going on a lot of Hyundai and Kia press events around that time, and it's almost literally they went from being kind of behind the times with some of those designs to setting trends. I think you could argue that Sonata of that vintage was a very significant car for Hyundai. I think it won Car of the Year even, based largely on its styling. They took a step forward ahead of everybody else. They almost, they had to in some ways, because they really needed to elevate their brand from being this value-oriented scenario to something that you might aspire to want, or at least put that message out there. I remember they had a Super Bowl commercial where they said it's Hyundai like Sunday, and they were just trying to really educate people and then also kind of sneak up in there and like, but hey, it does look really good. Look at this car, you know. You thought that was the Elantra, but this is the Elantra now. And, you know, that was a big step forward for them. I'm also struck too by how quickly they were able to get it together, you know? So,
well, I think one thing is like, they already had the quality down and the basics of the car. Like the 2010 Sonata and the 2010 Elantra were like, they lasted, you know, that the quality was there. I mean, there weren't, like, in terms of like the basics, the bones, it's not like they made some great leap forward from year to year. It's just like the design was amazing. And, you know, to your point about like it being a big deal at the time, the designer of the current Toyota Camry, I once asked him, like, we're just having drinks or something, and I was like, asking him, like, you know, what car came out that made you, like, you and other designers like stop and go, this is a game changer? And he said that 2011 Sonata, because that was like the mid-size sedans just all looked the same effectively, and that thing did not. That was like a game changer. They're like, we need to step up. And you look at all those sedans thereafter, all like that raised the bar. And then the Fusion came out and that raised the bar even further. That's on the list here. To the point now that all these mid-sized sedans look really good, just in time for no one to want them. But that's besides the point. The other thing that the Nissan Altima, going all the way back to 20 years ago, that was one where they not only changed the design, they changed the market segment that the car was in. That was the other kind of like the last kind of big game changer in the mid-size sedan segment.
I was at a European motor show. I want to say it was Geneva. It could have been Frankfurt, but it was when the Sportage was revealed, the new generation. And style was the whole like press conference, at least the parts of it that I could pick up in English. And I remember it was pronounced the Sportage. So that's my big memory of that. It's also interesting too, when you talk about design, how quickly you can almost put the past away. Like you have cars that look like they weren't even of the times. They were behind the times. And then the next model year, it's like, boom, that's how that car would look for the next 10, 15 years. You know, you look at the Mustang, you know, it went from something that had its roots. I mean, that thing was redesigned in the late 80s, if you will. And then that model came into the 90s after those Fox bodies finally went away. Didn't hang on actually as long as some of its predecessors did. But I mean, we've had a version of that Mustang for 17 years now at this point, you know, going on, you know, they've made enormous enhancements and improvements. But I mean, you know, to me, that's interesting how, like, you know, change can happen slowly, then literally all at once. And then that's it for, you know, another 10, 15 years. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I interviewed Ralph Gilles, who's the Stellantis Chrysler head of design. And he had a great line once. I've said this before on the podcast. He said something like, design is timeless. Good design is timeless. Bad design is timeless. It's still bad, you know, 20 years from now. And it's interesting when you look at some of the different redesigns, which ones went well, which ones didn't, where like the older car maybe looked a little better, or with the benefit of hindsight, it actually kind of hangs on a little better. So I don't know. We're going to be design columnists here.
Well, I'll just end it with one, and I thought that was interesting because it went beyond design, which is the Nissan Pathfinder. Yeah. And like, let's go beyond 20 years here. So it started as a body-on-frame, kind of what we would call compact SUV, but it was one of the original SUVs, body-on-frame truck. Second generation is now unibody, like the Jeep Grand Cherokee and Cherokee, but it's kind of the same body style. Third generation, we're going back to body on frame again, but now it's a 3-row SUV. Fourth generation, no, we're going back to unibody, but we're keeping the 3-row SUV thing. So like they had 4 generations that were like completely different. Like never mind that they're all called Pathfinder, but they like from the mechanics to their look like couldn't be any different. So that's one that really stood out to me. just like kind of like this constant identity crisis over the years.
Well, we just had a new generation of Pathfinder, and I remember thinking when it arrived in my driveway, what's it going to be this year? You know, I'd already read all the supporting documents and data and all that stuff, but you know, it's interesting. They have gone. The streak has ended. Yeah, yep. I find that entertaining as an automotive journalist. Like, it's more interesting when somebody's all over the place. You know, if it's the same thing with new mirrors and trim, I mean, okay, cover that in the press release. You know, let's make it interesting. You know what else is interesting is driving in the snow. Step 1, get snow tires. Step 2, what car should you get?
Yeah, so this was our best cars for the snow. Now, honestly, the snow tires thing is the most important. And, you know, trying to grade all-wheel drive systems without a skid pad available and a series of back-to-back tests, I don't know. So we just kind of picked the like good hardware, torque vectoring all-wheel drive systems, you know, good ground clearance in case you have a lot of, you know, deep snow to clear, and kind of focusing more on all around, you know, winter conditions, not just like, if you have 9 feet of snow, you probably want something, you know, like a Ram 2500 with the snow plow package. But like, you know, just if you just, you know, generally living in Michigan, you know, what would be a better, what would be a good vehicle? And that was kind of our goal in creating this, is focusing on cars that would be better than most in their segments. But ultimately get winter tires.
It's interesting. They do make a difference, even more so than I think 4-wheel or all-wheel drive in most circumstances. You know, I was just trying to find I'm sure the Tahoe's not on anything special as far as tires. A couple times I locked up and went skidding through kind of some of the roads, you know, and I think stereotypically you look at a vehicle that looks like a tank with 4-wheel drive and enough ground clearance to, like, you know, do like dog tricks with. I mean, it's pretty well off the ground, but if you hit a patch of ice or you hit snow the wrong way, away you go. And it really does, in many cases, come down to, like, you know, what, you know, where the rubber meets the road, if you will. So, best snow vehicles. Check it out. Went up last week on Autoblog.com. Any final thoughts, James?
Nope. I'm just going to go cry a bit that they've taken away my DBX.
Well, that's a tragedy, but I'm sure something else will be arriving soon and enjoyable, right?
No, nothing like the DBX.
Nothing like the DBX. Nothing like the DBX. I tell you what, if I can remember vividly my drive of it like a year almost later, I mean, that's when it's a memorable car. I mean, couldn't tell you what I drove the week before or the week after, but easy podcast conversation, because some cars really are that memorable, right? So that's kind of neat. All right. Well, maybe it's snowing where you are. If so, you have a list to choose from. It is actually about to snow right now. Like I said, we had a cold snap here, but it seems to be about to snow here. Send us your Spend My Monies at podcast@autoblog.com. If you enjoy the podcast, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next week. Be safe out there.